I love a film that can really make you think about life. I think that is the difference between films and movies. Like you might watch a film and you'll walk away from it really thinking about the intricacies of your life, like and realize that life isn't black and white. And that's why, particularly today, I'm deciding to talk about the movie 9 Days. And after watching this movie 9 days, I kind of walked away from the experience because it is an experience. I think that's also the difference when you watch films. I walked away from this experience really kind of thinking about my life. Like as cliche as that sound, like no movies or films, better yet, can make you really think about your life. And I think that's the beauty behind film. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Thank You for Sharing. Now, I know I'm learning how to be more consistent when it comes to this because it is trial and error. But, nonetheless, I'm very excited to continue going on. I thank everybody for supporting me. Shout out to everybody. I'll continue to shout you out. Today, we are talking about the film 9 Days. Now, I talked about in a little bit in the beginning of this video of how there's a difference between films and movies. I feel like films typically kind of like reflect life, and movies are typical like the blockbuster movies that that you hear about everywhere. And typically, a lot of movies or a lot of films tend to go underneath the radar that are, I'm not gonna say way better than these blockbusters, but they are way better than these blockbusters. And you'll never know about them because they don't have any like humongous press run for them. Like they're kind of things that you'll see if you really tapped into like the film circuit. Like I think this movie 9 Days was shown at Sundance and things like that. And if you're not really a part of the film world, you can miss out on these what I would consider life-changing films. And I'm not even exaggerating. After watching this movie, I kind of stepped away with a different perspective. So let's dive into what this movie is about. So first of all, like I said, this movie went completely under the radar, but it does have some notable actors. It has Winston Duke. He's from Black Panther, also from Us. Everyone knows him. What does he play in Black Panther? I don't know. He's from Black Panther and Us. He plays the dead in Us. And you have Zazie, who is famous for her role on the show Atlanta. You have Bill Skarsgård, who is known for his role as Pennywise, Benedict Wong, like so many good actors in this movie. And I doubt that a lot of people have heard about this movie. You also have Tony Hale, who's from the show Arrested Development. So a little insight about this movie. So this movie is about 5 unborn souls. And they all go through this like interview process to see which one of them will win the prize of going on Earth. Now, it is stated in the beginning of the movie that despite winning this competition, that none of them will have any recollection of what took place within these 9 days, while they're on Earth, but who they are as their core, their essence, all that will stay the same. They just will have no memory of what happened in the course of this 9 days. And I was watching someone talk about this movie and they kind of said this is like Soul, like the Disney Pixar movie Soul, but like for adults. And actually it kind of is, but it kind of explores, I guess, a little more darker themes than Pixar is able to explore. And so although Soul is for everybody, I wouldn't say just for kids, but this one, explores different things, but, they are in the same realm. So it starts out with Will, and he's looking at these array of TVs, and what these TV monitors represent are people's lives on Earth. It can also represent, people that he chose prior to this competition, but this is us seeing this, I guess you could say, quote unquote, competition. And so he's looking at these people's lives, this world that the director have created. It's something familiar, but something that's also outlandish or something that's a little bit, I would say, strange about this world. It's kind of like they're in a desert or like in a valley, and there's this like California looking home, older home that's just sitting by itself in the middle of nowhere. And you just have these souls come and they'll they'll stop by the house. Before they even choose the souls that are going along with the process, there's several souls who get interviewed. And, without giving away too much of the movie, he's definitely Will, who's played by Winston Duke, like this big burly 6'3" man, is interviewing these people with very like hard moral questions and kind of just seeing the answer. But it's kind of funny because the people who he has chose from this little interview, none of them really have any type of cohesion in terms of how they answered the question. Some of them, answered it in difficult ways. Some of them just said, point blank, period, what they would do. And the unique thing about this is Will, the guy who's interviewing, he's the only person who has experience of what it's like to be on Earth. He's accompanied by this guy named Keo, who is kind of like his, I'm not gonna say assistant, but they kind of work together. And but Keo does not know what it's like to have experience on Earth. So only Will has that in terms of this picking process. Each one of these souls, they're very different from each other. And these souls are represented by people. And it's really funny, man. Some of the first questions he asked them, like, when did you learn to talk? And they're like, 3. He's like, 3 days? And they're like, no, 3 hours. Like, I learned how to talk and things like that. The concept of the movie is really good. So he ends up picking about 5 people for this project. And in the midst of this project, they just go through these different tasks. And what they typically are asked to do is to look at the monitors and kind of pick somebody to kind of focus on. Like, pick one of these characters who are on Earth. And then Will ask them kind of like moral questions, pertaining to these people. Like, what would you do in this situation? Or what would you do, in this situation? And they're not easy situations. And I think that for someone who was watching the movie, the more you're kind of looking at these things, you kind of begin to just, automatically ask yourself those questions. You might sit there and be like, what would I do in this situation? It's kind of like that typical old philosophical question where people are asking, like, is it okay to kill one person if you're saving the lives of many? Like, everyone would sit here and have different answers for what that, and like different answers to that question, because it's not a black and white question. And so, every day he kind of checks in with these souls, and he kind of asks them to write about things that they've noticed, and he kind of interviews them about it. You notice different reactions or different things from these different souls. But I think most notably, the soul that kind of, in my opinion, sticks out the most is Emma, and she's played by Zazie. And this soul, she just comes, first of all, she comes later than everyone else does. And she just kind of plays by her own rules, but not in a I guess, Rage Against the Machine way, but in a way that's kind of very intuitive. And I feel like in some certain way, all of these souls, they all kind of represent, I guess, different characteristics that we may have as people. Like I said before, some of them are timid, some of them are bold, and some of them are just, like Emma, she's just a free character, she'll ask questions that maybe no one else would ask, and she'll notice things that other people don't notice. And in the midst of all of this experience, all they do is have 9 days. All Will has is 9 days to decide what soul will win the opportunity of getting to go to Earth. So Will, being the only person that has experience of what it's like being on Earth, he is still kind of like a gloomy character. Like, he doesn't say much. He's very much about his job, and he asks questions that I feel like that he just needs to ask. Like, there's nothing that is personally him in the beginning of this story. Like, there's nothing. Like, he's just kind of going through the bases and just kind of trying to pick candidates. And you'll notice that he's very bothered by one of his candidates that is already on Earth. Her name is Amanda. And out of any of the candidates, he just seemed to follow this one more closely. And Amanda, the person that is on Earth, she's like, a talented violinist and all of these things. But then there's a part of the movie, and this is not really giving anything away, and it's also kind of, the debate is one of the debates of this movie. She gets into a car accident, and it's kind of like one of these things like, did she do it on purpose or was it an accident? And I don't know, it's a lot of questions that can bubble up in the midst of kind of watching this movie. You kind of sit to yourself, because as much as Will can watch this participant that he has chose to go into Earth or go into the real world, he still has no recollection of what they think in their head. He can only see what they're doing, and that kind of begs the question. You seeing these, you can see people do things, but you never really understand what may be going through a person's head. Like you never understand what a person can really be thinking about in the back of their mind, because all you can see is their action. As the days go along, you have certain candidates who Will just says doesn't fit the criteria. And you as the viewer, you don't know exactly what he's looking for. I mean, in a way, the film kind of makes you care about certain characters more, like certain souls. You may kind of root for them more, but ideally, you still don't know what he is looking for in a candidate, you know? And then at the end of the day, there's nothing that he can say or nothing that he can do that would prove that this person would be the best person on earth. All he can do is subject them to tests that may not even be the real caliber of what life is. That is very relatable to everyday life. We live in a world where people try to be cookie cutter, or we have systems that are very cookie cutter, but in the real world, or in the reality of it all, we are not the same person. What may works for you may not work for somebody else. And so when you begin to kind of look at things like that, this movie becomes very much interesting, because you kind of want to get into the thought process of Will, like what is going on behind his head that is making him choose, the people that he wants to choose. One of the very cool things about this movie is in the midst of Will's choosing process, some of the souls don't make it all the way to the 9 days. But one of the things that he does for the souls is he gives them one moment that maybe they've watched from the TV or something like that, that he could recreate in his own way, that would give them kind of like that final send-off, that final piece. And it also begs the question, where do they go when they leave? Like, we don't really know. We just know they don't make it. But he creates an experience, and I really like it because the experiences that he is making isn't an elaborate experience, Like, for example, one of the contestants, he wanted to know what it was like to be on the beach. He drew a beach before he even knew he was going to be eliminated. He was very shy about to even share his drawing with anyone else. But when it was time for him to depart, he chose the beach as his memory. And so what Will did was he took this projector and he put a beach on. And he gave the guy like headphones with beach noises. And he would mimic the waves with like a rake or something in the water. But the experience kind of took you there. And then one thing that Will says throughout the process is that, the emotions that you feel, the pain that you could feel in this world, is only a tenth of what they can feel on Earth. So it really kind of really makes you think, like, man, if a person is so worried and so anxious in this world, like, imagine how they would be on this Earth, or things like that. It kind of makes you think like, wow, like all of us are maybe hand chosen to be here. You wouldn't be here if you couldn't bear it. But anyway, Will creates these experiences for these characters as they depart. What's really cool to me is that the moments that the characters are choosing aren't any grand elaborate things. They aren't like what you would consider like weddings or birthdays or any other major event. They're the most smallest minute things in life. Like, it's maybe like, a walk in the park, or maybe like, going to the beach and just enjoying nature. It isn't like, I'm finna go to the strip club and, throw a million ones on this stripper. Like, no, it's nothing, in my opinion, that what the world or what people would tell you that you may need to be happy. It's the small moments. And so watching this film, you begin to become very emotionally attached to these characters. And there's a part in you that really can understand how scary life is. And for these characters, I mean, they haven't even stepped into this world that we all are living in. Like, this is before they get into this world. But it still kind of lets you know how scary life may be. And so you become very emotionally involved with these characters. And you begin to kind of feel empathy for them, whether they make it or don't make it. The ones that don't make it, you're kind of sad because they go into this unknown place after they're not chosen. So the best you can do is enjoy the small moments now because you don't know what may be later. You don't know what may be later. I most certainly believe in a great afterlife, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I would want to experience what life has to offer and the small stuff. And I would say honestly, man, where I've been at in my life lately, recently I had a death in the family and my aunt passed away. And in the midst of all that, going to her funeral, I just kind of realized how beautiful life can be. And I'm not gonna be sit here and be cliche and be like, oh man, that you know everybody got to look at death as this beautiful thing, which you should look at as a beautiful thing, but that doesn't take away from the part that you should take time to grieve and do things like that. But you begin to see certain parts of people that you've never seen. Like, you may see family members, you may have family members in your life that you've never really seen go through something until they have a loss. And you kind of see how it can affect them. You begin to kind of think about life as all. I think anybody who's been to a funeral can agree that one of the things you think about, like, man, when will it be my time? When will it be my loved one's time? And we're all on borrowed time, regardless of what you believe. We're all here on borrowed time. And in the midst of, like, going to my aunt's funeral and just kind of sitting there and really just thinking to myself, like, man, this thing we call life is very special. And it is kind of crazy that we live in a society where it's not really held in high regards. We hear things, we think about death so much, or we hear about it so much that it's kind of like we're numb to it. It's like you can hear about somebody dying, and if they're not like a close relative, it's kind of like, like, okay, like, man, that's sad, but you go on about your day. And true, life must go on, you know? But I think that most importantly, there needs to be an appreciation that becomes of life. Because before my aunt, I had a professor that passed away, and even going to his funeral, I was just kind of thinking to myself, man, that, like, wow, before he passed, before my aunt passed, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about all of these things that don't matter. I'm thinking about, how can I make $1 million so I can buy a house? How can I flex on my ex? How can I, all of these, like, dumb thoughts. But these dumb thoughts hold just as much validity in our minds at the time of, at that time of our lives, that we don't really sit here and think about the small things. So watching this movie and then having these experiences that I've been having in life of people that are kind of leaving here left and right, I've learned to just be grateful. I've learned to thank God for things, and I've learned to just be very appreciative of what I've have, and just to honestly to see another day. And I try to think to myself, what small moment can I enjoy today? Like, I very much have been on kind of like a nature wave of kind of just like, if I'm sitting at a traffic light, I may look at a tree, I may look at the sky. If it's raining, I might just sit there and just kind of listen to the rain. Or if I'm sitting and I'm enjoying time with my family, like, most importantly, when death like that or things like that happen, ultimately you should come together as people. You should show appreciation because it's just a reminder that we're not here forever. And it's funny that a movie that is, fictional and it's talking about life before, all of these souls have not made it onto earth, but yet they can still understand something still is inside of them to know that the most beautiful moments are the small moments. And, that could come across as cheesy or whatever, but actually take time to appreciate the things that you have in your life, appreciate where you are right now, and you will truly begin to see that, man, life is really about the small things. And it's crazy because we get so caught up in pop culture and we get so caught up in certain ideologies that we get or that we're fed that we don't really realize that none of that does not matter. When I'm sitting here at these funerals, I'm not thinking about this certain stuff. I'm thinking about life, and I'm thinking about, wow, bro, there's going to be a day where it's my turn to be in that box, or it's my turn, you know, to leave this earth. And can I say that I've really sat here and enjoyed the things that I've had? Or was I always worried about what I don't have or what I can't obtain? And imagine if I died doing that, like that's no peace. Like my soul would not have peace when I could just be grateful for the small times of like, you know, spending time with my friend. Like that is one thing that I've been really kind of making sure I'm trying to do with my friends, especially now at this age, before all of us kind of like have families and stuff. It's just kind of like, yo, we need to appreciate each other's time, you know? Like we need to go on vacations together and just kind of hang out and create these memories, because when we get to a certain age, all you have is these memories, you know? I'm not going to care about that Lambo. You know, I'm going to get a Lambo. But, you know, I'm not going to care. I'm not going to hold my emphasis on like that Lambo and things like that. Something else that kind of sticks out to me is, man, the character Will. He's the person out of all of these souls, the only person to experience life. And he's the most rigid character. He's the most standoffish character. He's dark. He doesn't, you know, he talks about how he wants to be numb to it. He wants to kind of forget what his life was like on Earth. Because while he was on Earth, he was criticized and he didn't really allow for his best experience. So now that he's kind of like the person in position, you know, he can only look from his outlook of what life is. In the midst of like, you know, all of this stuff, Will is slowly becoming more human. And one of the characters that get him to do that is the character Emma. And she just kind of reminds him once again that it's all about the small stuff and to really be appreciative. You know, you could sit here, and I think much like the character Will, he was maybe more focused on what he didn't have, what he didn't experience on Earth, or, you know, the support system he didn't have while he was on Earth. And yes, it sucks, but imagine how it would be if you would have, how full life can be if you would have focused on the small stuff. And I swear that is why I enjoy films. Because, you know, I've been watching a lot of films lately that have really made me sit here and reflect on life. And, you know, anybody that's an artist or anybody that enjoys art, it affects your life in a certain type of way, you know, whether that's positive or whether that's negative. But really sit here, and I challenge you, if you're a person that typically looks at blockbuster movies, you know, watch it film. Watch something that may be focused more on how you think more than just entertaining, because it can be very much both. You know, I'm not knocking blockbusters. I love some horrible movies. Hot take, Emoji Movie was not that bad. That's a hot take, but it was not that bad. Now, the concept, you know, I'll go all day, but the concept was kind of trash, but the movie itself was not that bad. But anyway, really try to watch films, or like there's so many good movies like this movie that goes underneath the radar because, you know, it's not, and it makes sense. You know, why would people always want people to kind of be woke, or why would people want people to appreciate life? You know, you may not be buying certain things, or you may not be chasing certain things if you are numb to things. But, you know, I think you could do both. I think you could buy things that can make you happy because, you know, money does buy happiness. You know, I stand on that, but it can't be your sole reasoning for happiness, and it can't be your sole motivation for happiness. Like, you must have people or small things. Like, as of lately, you know, I've been reading and I've been really trying to sit here and do things that I may not normally do, or appreciate things that I may not normally appreciate, because, you know, we get so caught up in life. We get so caught, and it's so easy. It is so easy to get caught up in life. So I challenge everybody to watch this movie. If you have seen it, you know, let me know what your take on it, because I'm sure there's so many different takes to it. But what is your opinion? What is your opinion of this movie? You know, I really want people to watch things or associate themselves, you know, whether that's music or anything, with stuff that's truly life-changing. I want people to make art that is life-changing. I think the most beautiful thing is you can make things from your perspective. Nobody on earth has your perspective. So use your perspective. What's the use of a perspective if you're just following what everybody else says? If you sat down and really formulated your own opinion and you really sat down and it can very much well be welcomed by the masses. But if you sat and you formulated your own opinion from your own experience, and that's from you taking time out of your life, because no one's living life like you, to really appreciate the small things, you could contribute to better art. You could contribute to ultimately a better life. Like, as cheesy as it sounds, or as it may sound, nah, like for real. I'm understanding that everything is on borrowed time. Just because you're young don't mean that you're not gonna die. Just because you're old. And I have something in my Instagram bio that says, remember you will die. And as dark as it sounds, and I've had it in there for a minute, as dark as it sounds, to me it's just a reminder to do things that I would not normally do. Get out of my comfort zone. Stop thinking that I'll have tomorrow. I procrastinated so much even filming this episode. And I just was like, it's Thanksgiving week. I'm like, bro, I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll do it after things. Like, nah, let me be real. Let me just sit down and actually do it, because, tomorrow's not promised, And so you have to learn to appreciate now. Stop looking for tomorrow. I've said this a million times. Do the things that you want to do now, because it's not promised. And I love, 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 love watching films and watching things like this that could really change your perspective moving on from it. And it's also a movie that you can watch multiple times, because you'll pick up small things about it. And the cinematography on it, dog. Like, if you're a geek and you're into cinematography and you like the colors and how, bro, this movie is very aesthetically pleasing. And it has a concept that can also be discovered. I ain't even looked that hard into the concept, but it's also other people in this world that is like Will, that are picking, people to go on Earth. But there's also people who are picking Will, and someone's picking that person. It's like a never-ending change. So I'm sure that's a theme that can be explored. But watch this movie and see which character you can empathize with the most. And honestly, it kind of makes me think to myself, we're all picked to be here. What if we went through a similar process like this? And it kind of lets you know that you're picked to be here. There's a reason why you're here. So what is the reason why you're here on this earth? Are you going to waste it? Are you going to sit here and you're going to enjoy life? Because not everybody in that competition had the same opportunity you had. So what are you going to do that sets yourself apart from them? What are you going to do to be like, hey, man, I earned my position to be here on earth? And that's all I have to say about this episode. If I get a little preachy, forgive me. But I'm going to talk about the stuff that I'm extremely passionate about. That's just me. Anybody can ask you. I talk a lot. I'm going to talk about what's passionate for me. And that's what I want to do. That's what I want to continue to do. And also, if you're watching this, please stay. If you're watching or listening, stay on me, bro. Make sure that I'm consistent when it comes to doing this. Encourage me. Give me feedback. I need it and I welcome it, because ultimately I'm trying to get better at this, and I'm trying to really see what I can do to help people, because ultimately I want to create a safe space for people in general. And I do that through art and through music and through movies and films. I want to create a safe space. I want somebody to be able to listen to this podcast to start their day, and they can go on about their day and be like, man, let me listen. Because it's not about me. I'm trying to learn how to take the back seat. I'm not going to lie and say that I would appreciate, some sort of recognition. That's anybody for what they do. But ultimately, I want to encourage people to be the best version of themselves. And I want you to encourage me to be the best version of myself. Because, I'm not that different from you. That's for sure. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching this. I appreciate you so much. And continue to let me know how I can get better. And if you want to, come on the show, talk about one of your favorite films, one of your music, let's do it. I'm in the process of, getting things a little bit more professional before I really kind of, give it the rollout. But, I'm making a list right now of people who want to come on the show. And I'm very excited for what I'll be able to bring with this platform. So thank you so much for tuning in. You have a great day. Remember, enjoy the small things in life. And ultimately, thank you for sharing.